I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. Stop agreeing with yourself. Stop agreeing with yourself.
Hello, and welcome to Glass Half Full Reviews, where we have our cake and eat it too. Today, I will be reviewing Knights of Badassdom.
How awesome was that? Lightning bolt! Lightning bolt!
And in particular, I also will be looking at this Blu-ray. And potentially, I'll be talking a little bit about the extras, or lack thereof, that might be included. So Knights of Badassdom has a bit of a troubled history. I don't know if many people are aware, but there's this thing called LARPing, which stands for Live Action Role-Playing. It's basically where a bunch of guys and gals, mostly guys, dress up in medieval-type costumes of this fantasy-type Dungeons and Dragons, and basically go out and fake fight with each other. And obviously there's different rules and but in the echelons of nerdiness, LARPers are looked down upon by everyone else that considers themselves a nerd, essentially. Basically, they think, guys, can you tone down the nerdiness a little, please? Not to say that it can't be fun. I mean, people like doing those kinds of role-playing things in a smaller setting, sitting around a table making things up. People like to play around outside and do make-believe. Although, most of the time, it's when you're a kid that you do this kind of thing, and it's really just an extension of that. So this movie is essentially about a bunch of LARPers in a big LARPing convention of sorts, where many different teams all fight together for some sort of prize. Now, Knights of Badassdom was a smaller budgeted film that basically was subject to a lot of problems in terms of schedule and budget overruns. Things weren't exactly finished as they were expected, and a lot of things were cut out that were initially planned. And of course, after that, the movie had trouble getting distribution. So, for years, we didn't think we were going to see this movie. It was supposed to come out last year. It didn't come out last year. Even the year before, there was talk about it coming out. Finally, this year, it's gotten a little bit of limited distribution and video on demand, and of course, the Blu-ray. Now, at first you might think, oh, well, this movie has all sorts of interesting stuff for nerds. I mean, it's got Summer Glau, from Firefly and Dollhouse and various other properties that I don't care about. And of course, you have Peter Dinklage, who's just a great actor, and obviously is very well known now from Game of Thrones, although at the time of him filming this, it wasn't quite as much. And of course, you have various other people like Steve Zahn and others that I think that you might recognize. But you think, okay, LARPing, Peter Dinklage, Summer Glau, sounds pretty nerdy, it should be great. What is it about? Okay, so the movie, of course, is about this team of people, and they go out to face against other teams in some forest somewhere. But of course, there was an accident because some people accidentally summoned a demon succubus type. A demon. So this demon is running around actually killing people. Whoops! So, our team of the adventurers of bland types and not as bland types have to try to figure out a way to defeat this demon once and for all, and etc. Without, as many people dying along the way. This movie is all over the place. I'll get into some of my specific issues once I get into the breakdown, but I will say that I appreciate what this movie was trying to do. It's clear watching these actors get, in this set that just having a ball of a time, that they're really enjoying themselves. And what I saw from some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, apparently they got some real-life LARPers involved as well to actually add a little bit of verisimilitude to the process. But does that make it a good movie? No. Does it make it a fun movie? Sort of. So, I didn't feel like I had to turn off this movie, but there were definitely slow points. There were definitely characters you just didn't care about. And when there's something that has barely any setup and then they die, it's like, oh, okay. And even though this is supposed to be sort of like a horror comedy, you want to have a little bit of connection just so you want to see that catharsis at the end of some sort of, defeat the evil type of thing. And that being said, it's the comedy that really suffers here. The truth is, it just wasn't funny. There were a lot of attempts at it, of course, but I didn't find it funny at all. Now, of course, there's a few little things here and there, little tricks that they do with a few funny imagery things and a few names of the LARPing groups and a little, some little CGI stuff that I thought was pretty clever, but they sort of stopped doing that. And I guess part of this is probably due to the costs that the movie had, and that they had to cut a lot of things out. But I also felt like there was a lot of disservice to things. Ryan Kwanten plays the main character, and I haven't seen anything else that he's done in recent memory, but I was not so impressed here. Now, I think a lot of that is actually due to the character itself and not him, but it was a very flat character and kind of a flat performance. You also had Summer Glau, who basically doesn't have anything interesting to do or say as well. And they even do a little bit of trying to do some cheesecake stuff with her, but it's almost like they don't do enough. Now, that may seem like an odd thing to say, but if that's what you're trying to get across, at least, go all the way with it. At least say, oh yeah, well, let's get some skimpy outfits here. Not necessarily saying that one way or another, but they make a few weird references to it, and if you look at one of the features in the Blu-ray, it's actually, there's a Hot and Is Real with Summer Glau, which is pretty terrible, just in terms of, it's just a bunch of clips from the movie, and, it's her doing stuff. So I wouldn't call it particularly hot one way or another, other than it's her, I guess. And listen, I think she has been at her best when Joss Whedon is doing stuff for her, and otherwise, not so much. And I don't know if that's limitations of acting or directing, or people don't know how to deal with her or what, but I've never really been impressed with her outside of the Joss Whedon properties, which I guess is unfortunate. I wanted to see more ass-kicking from her, which we didn't see. Obviously, there is a little bit of the, oh, well, these are all sort of play acting, but even with that, I was just sort of disappointed by the lack of actual fighting. And of course, Peter Dinklage, he is not in the movie enough. I would say he's the best part. He is an interesting character, and they try to, make fun of potential stereotypes about smaller people, but it's never really funny or even that clever. I think they do a decent job of trying at it, but I was never blown away by the lines. Peter Dinklage, though, he does a good job. He does his best. And the rest of it, though, the horror elements they're fine. They're simplistic. I mean, it seems like this was sort of someone's thought of, well, I shouldn't say that, because I saw the behind-the-scenes stuff. It is someone's idea, this fascination with this LARPing thing that somehow becomes real. I just don't think they took it far enough. I liked the idea behind it. It's just sort of a failed execution. I wouldn't call it a bad movie, but it seems like an incomplete movie. All right, let's move to my 5-point breakdown.
5-point breakdown.
All right, the acting. So this is a little bit all over the place too. As I said, I thought the main guy was not so great, and Summer Glau was also not so great. Some of the supporting people, like Zahn and type, they were fine. I didn't find that funny, but I can't really blame them if the lines were not bad. But I can't really blame that entirely on them, considering I didn't find the lines themselves that funny. Of course, Peter Dinklage, definitely a standout, and, girl plays a succubus, does a decent job at that sort of thing. But in general, it's not the best. All right, the story. As I've said already, the concepts here are interesting in terms of this, they're trying to integrate the live action role playing with a real element of danger. That's an interesting idea. It's just not fleshed out too well. And of course, the attempts at humor are unfortunately really half-baked. So I wasn't so happy with that. I tried to be, but I wasn't. All right, how does it look? Cheap, but not too cheap. I was just watching some of Warehouse 13, and I thought, oh, that's cheap. And so really, I feel like, well, this is supposed to be a horror comedy. It's not supposed to look that realistic. And that being said, I feel like some of the CGI actually looked okay. I thought that once you started getting to some of the monstrous stuff, it was a little too silly, but it was a lot of practical stuff, too. It just wasn't the best practical stuff. I think that they could have done a better job with some of those types of things. But, what are you going to do? I mean, I've already said how it's interesting how they integrated real LARPer people into it. I just don't think there was enough of that. And the feel. I don't know. I would have liked it to have been better. And I think there was a lot of potential there for a better movie. And I just don't think they pulled it off. All right, so let's talk about how or if it matters. All right. So, does it matter? I think it matters in how it failed. I think a lot of reasons why it had so many problems is some of these underlying issues. The script was just not really strong enough. So I think that comes across. I can understand why people who might be trying to jump in and let's capture some of that nerd zeitgeist, I'd say, I don't know, I don't feel like this is really going to work. And I get it, I can see that. There's no way this movie is going to be doing that well, even as a cult classic, except maybe, 10, 15 years later, maybe people are just going to discover it as, this little gem. The problem with movies that are trying to be cheesy is that it toes a really thin line. And I look at something like Sharknado and think, it barely gets over the line to this is fun to watch, from, I understand what you're trying to do. Unfortunately, with Knights of Badassdom, it doesn't get over that line. It's close at times, but I just don't feel like either it was cheesy enough or funny to really work. It needed to either be a really hilarious movie, and then it's okay if the rest of it is kind of, low budget, or it needed to be just embrace the cheesiness. And it does it a few times here and there. It just doesn't really get there. So, what's my final verdict? Unfortunately, this isn't the nerdy movie you're looking for. Better luck next time. Thanks for stopping by.